Hey y'all, so I'm going to talk about the elementary school topic for this year. This year we're going to be talking about mandatory voting. So what that means is it means that the United States government would be establishing a requirement for everyone to vote come election day. So how does the government enforce something like that? Well, if you decided that you're just going to stay in bed instead of going to the polls on election day and you're someone who could be eligible to vote, the government might issue a fine or some other kind of penalty for you to pay. So like a speeding ticket, kind of. So when we're talking about mandatory voting, the affirmative this year is going to be saying that we should have mandatory voting, and the negative is going to be saying that we shouldn't. We split the topic up into a couple sections that I think are good to think about when you're coming up with your arguments for the affirmative or the negative. And the first of these is voter turnout. So when you're affirmative, you can definitely make the argument that if the United States adopts mandatory voting, it's going to increase the amount of people that come out to the polls on election day. And you can talk about why that's good, because that means, our democracy are running smoothly because people are coming out to vote. If you're negative, you can make the argument that increasing voter turnout isn't a good thing because only the people who are interested in politics are voting right now, and making it a requirement, who cares? People who are showing up to vote now definitely don't care about the election, so you can make arguments on both sides for that one. Another topic that I think is important to talk about is government quality and the quality of the people who get elected to government. The affirmative might argue that if we have mandatory voting, the quality of our elected representatives is going to go up because they are responsible and responsive to the needs of the entire electoral base, instead of just the people who would normally vote. And if you look at statistics about who normally votes, that sometimes says that it's mostly older people or mostly people with more money that turn out to vote. So instead of politicians focusing their campaigns to recruit people like that, they would be focusing their campaigns on recruiting the entire voting base as a whole. However, the negative could make the argument that that's not true. Actually, the people who are going to be coming out to vote are going to decrease the quality of the representatives because they don't care about politics. They aren't invested in the American political system, so they'll just vote for whoever instead of actually caring if the politician is appealing to what they want. So actually our government would look worse in a scenario in which we had mandatory voting. Another topic area that we have is whether voting is more of a duty or it should be something that people are free to choose to do. So the affirmative might say, well, in a democracy, people are responsible for fulfilling their duties to, the democracy, so they should vote. And establishing mandatory voting is just a way that the government can do that, and it's not some intrusive thing, and it's actually being a good democracy by doing that. However, the negative can say, well, the government shouldn't force people to come out of their workplace on Tuesdays and vote. That's an infringement on their liberties, which is an argument that you can also make. You can say that if we require people to vote, then they don't have a choice. And if the government's getting rid of choice, that's not a good thing because that necessarily reduces the amount of freedom a person has. And that you can make a case for that too. Another part of the topic you can talk about is government resources. So this part of the topic gets into how much money the government has. So if you have people getting fined for not voting on election day, the government would get a little bit more money because there's people paying it for things. So you can make the argument that, well, with that more money, the government can fund schools, they can build roads, they can develop new bridges, and stuff like that. But the negative can say that actually mandatory voting is expensive. Because if you require everyone to vote, then you have to have some way to enforce that. So you have to have things that track who's voting or not, and then issue penalties or fines to people who aren't voting. So there's definitely a lot of ways you can approach this year's topic. I think that the negative and affirmative both have a lot to say on it, and I'm excited to see how this year plays out.